This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call a regular meeting of the St. Peter Economic Development Authority. It is 12:07 roughly. This is a regular meeting. It is Thursday, September 24th, 2020. And the meeting is being held in a virtual format as provided for in the state statute. I'd ask, well, we got to have an oath of office first. Julie, can you turn to the oath on page 1 and just raise your right hand and read it to us, please?
Sure. I, Julie Frederickson, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and that of the state of Minnesota, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of an Economic Development Authority member in and for the city of St. Peter, Minnesota, to which office I have been appointed to the best of my judgment and ability.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'll ask you to pop in sometime and sign it and have Cindy notarize it. So, but welcome to the EDA, Julie. For you, those of you that don't know, Julie operates a consulting business, a lot of digital marketing and things of that nature. I became acquainted with Julie when we were both working for the 1 Million Cups operation and proposing or putting together the St. Peter presentation. So Julie has joined us. She is former member of the Tourism and Visitors Board. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you for having me.
Would anyone move approval of the agenda?
DeVos will move.
We have a motion by DeVos. What was the second?
Eagles.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the agenda as presented, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, same sign. We have an agenda approved. In the packet, you have the minutes that have been prepared for the August 19th, 2020 meeting. Would there be a motion to approve the minutes or any noted corrections or alterations?
I'll motion to approve. That's Southworth.
We have a motion by Southworth. Is there a second?
And I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further comment? Hearing none, all in favor of the minutes as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Very good. I don't have any unfinished business, although this item perhaps could have been put under unfinished business, but City Administrator Prafke is here. I think this is the third time to talk about fire station funding and fire station timing and referendums and all of those things. So, Mr. Prafke.
Mr. Chair and members of the Economic Development Authority, thanks for having me here. There was a memo included in your packet which provides an update, and I can certainly go through that extensively if you'd like, but I'm sure you've all had the chance to read it. Really, the reason for me to come here today is because, as you know, the EDA is proposed to be intimately involved in the financing of a new fire station that's built. As you are aware, with the legislative session, with COVID, with a number of issues, probably longer than my arm is, the sales tax issue that the city council had proposed that needed approval of the state legislature before it comes back to a local vote was not acted upon by the state houses or signed by the governor. None of them were. We were one of 14 communities that applied for that opportunity. And as I think mentioned to this group before, of the 14, at least based on information that I received from the Senate tax chair, we were one of 2 that met the new criteria under the new legislation that was approved actually now a couple of years ago, 2 legislative sessions ago. So this is intended to be an update of the council's discussion. Again, since you're going to be intimately involved in financing, wanted to make sure that you were aware that the council has directed staff to push back additional development of this for a year. This is based on a recommendation from my office, but certainly I think on a number of different issues, one of which relates to that sales tax opportunity. Since that cannot be on the ballot this year, there is a substantial risk in moving forward without that sales tax authority. And the risk would likely manifest itself as a part of substantially higher property taxes. As you may recall, We anticipate the debt service to be, around $360,000, $380,000, depending on a number of factors per year. And we anticipated that sales tax, if approved at the state and then at the local level, would provide a little bit, very near 2/3 of that funding, and then 1/3 would be paid for by local property taxes. Again, this is a 1/2 cent increase that the council still continues to discuss. Certainly, as we move into the new legislative session, this will be reviewed by the council again, and they could make a change to that. But right now, the discussion has been a consistent approach and the same approach as we used during the last legislative session to move that forward. I'd stand for any questions that you might have. Again, my goal was to provide you an update, and if you have questions about the timeline or why the timeline, certainly I'm here as our 2 council members who sit on this authority. Brad and Ed are on the council as well, and we've talked about this, I believe, 2 other times, or to be more clear, we've talked about the potential moving of the timeline 2 separate times at city workshops, just to make sure that everybody was aware and had opportunity to think about it, ask any questions that they might have, and consider the options that are out there. So again, Mr. Chair, if there are any other questions, I'm happy to try and answer those as best I can.
Does anyone have a question?
Mr. Chair and members, my goal will be to keep you updated as well. So if something should deviate from this plan substantially, I'll be coming back to you. But as we're kind of leaving it right now, it's anticipated that the council will request sales tax from the state in the upcoming legislative session. If that's approved, it will come at the next general election, so November of 21. And if that's approved by the local electorate, then you'll be involved in debt issuance sometime probably summer of 22-ish, give or take a little bit, depending on construction timeline and a couple of other things. But that's kind of how the timeline looks like right now. I will mention one other item related to USDA, just to avoid some confusion, because I've had a few people ask me about this. So right now, we are locked in for a period of 5 years at an interest rate not to exceed 2.25% with this funding provided through the USDA. 2.25%. You may read or may have already heard that the hospital number, which was at 2.25% also, now is actually going to go down to 2.125%. So I don't want people to get confused about that. The reason for that is that USDA is lowering their interest rate for the last quarter of this year when the hospital financing is closing. Again, our number for the fire hall cannot exceed 2.25%. If the number at closing is lower, we get that number, but it cannot be higher. It just so happens that the hospital is closing here in October, and it has gone down to 2.125%, which, by the way, on the hospital saves about $900,000 over the term. So if you have questions about that too, happy, but that might get out. And so people wonder about interest rate. How does that work? That's kind of the story on how the interest rate works with the USDA.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Todd, actually, maybe you might want to explain why, I know you explained to the city council, but why wouldn't we necessarily go ahead with building the fire station now and then and then approaching the legislature after that? So.
I think the challenge is that the legislature, at least according to House research, has only, and this term may not be the exact correct term, but has retroactively approved a sales tax. And by that, I mean more specifically where a project has been built or started building, and then they approve the sales tax after that. And so there's a risk in that. It's only been done once before, and it's kind of a substantial risk that would be taken by the council if we moved forward with the hopes of doing that, with no guarantee that that can be brought before the local electorate to vote on in November of 2021.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything else? If not, thank you, Mr. Prafke. I know Mr. Prafke would be more than happy to speak to you individually if you want to call him and talk about it in more depth, or questions you weren't comfortable or didn't want to raise here. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, folks.
Okay, Central Business District ADA Enhancement Grant Program. Let me just talk a little bit about the need for doing this. Is at a council goal session, they talked about what could be done to incent greater accessibility for those with mobility impairments. And so the EDA was asked to consider a financing program to help provide some financing then for entryway, ramps, doors, automatic door systems, etc. We did put that together. The city council did accept that, and we implemented it in 2020 here. But first of all, just a couple statistics. According to the Minnesota Council of Disabilities, 20% or 25% of the population, rather, 15 years and older has a disability. Just about 12% of the population 15 years and older has an ambulatory disability. 52% of the population over 65 has a disability. And one that stands out to an economic development person is that the disabled cohort in the United States has $490 billion of a disposable income. So it certainly is a market. It certainly has considerable dollars that are available. The eligibility for our grant loan/loan program were all of the properties within the Central Business District, with the exception of those such as City Hall or the courthouse, so non-government owned. It can be privately owned and leased to a governmental agency and participate, but if the underlying ownership is the county, the state, or the city, it would not be eligible to participate. Again, the eligible renovations were doorways, ramps, wheelchair lifts, and automatic door systems. The loans, well, they're structured as a 15-year loan. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's at 0% interest and a maximum of $25,000. Now, a project in excess of $25,000 can be undertaken as long as the property owner would demonstrate that they have access on deposit for the balance of that or other financing. We'll enter into a grant agreement, or we have entered into a grant agreement with the participants in 2020. They obligate themselves to maintain that improvement for 15 years. They agreed to adequately insure the property against peril. It does require the Heritage Preservation Commission undertake a review when appropriate. Basically, if they're doing a full entryway, the automatic doors they put in, we did not go to the HPC with them. We will record a mortgage, and as I said, it's structured as a 15-year loan, and the loan is forgivable at 1/15 a year. So at the end of the 15th year, we will stamp it paid in full. We'll release the mortgage and satisfy that, and hopefully the property owner will continue to maintain it past that. So we had a 2020 grant cycle. We accepted grants up until February 28th. We had earmarked $34,578 for the 2020 program. That was based upon the interest income of the revolving loan fund in 2018. We appointed a project selection committee, and they didn't have to meet because we only received 3 applications. So we financed the installation of automatic door systems at Riley Tannis. They actually had 2 installed, one on the outer door, one on the vestibule door. Swedish Contour had 1 installed on their Minnesota Avenue front. They only needed 1 since it was a direct entry into the store. And then Kind Vet Clinic also put in 2 doorways. They have the same situation, outside door and an interior vestibule. So we only spent $11,863 of the $34,500 plus that was earmarked. So we didn't have to have a selection committee. Everybody got funded that applied. The question is, do you want to recommend reauthorizing the program for 2021 applications? If so, Sally Vogel, Finance Director, reports that the interest income from 2019 was $28,434. So we could likely do at least 3 more automatic door openers and perhaps a couple extra. One thing as we go forward is I might suggest that we forego the recording of a mortgage. That was based upon a previous council member's concern that we would finance something and then in year 3, they would have it removed and would remove their handicapped accessibility. I think that probably is highly unlikely. And I can report that the 3 applicants and recipients of the loan/grant in 2020 are very, very pleased with the installation. Very, very smooth, very, very well done. And now they can advertise themselves as being fully handicapped accessible. I'm going to go through this, and if you've got a question, just turn on your microphone.
Hey, Russ, I just have a question on removing the mortgage.
Yeah.
What would be the process then if they took out a loan, did the repairs, and then sold the property within a couple years?
We've considered assignability, and it's likely that it would be assigned to the new owner.
Okay, so that'd have to be part of their agreement.
Yeah,
Like
we'd work it to make it assignable, so the new property owner then just could take over those. Well, there is no payments, so we'd figure it out, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to hinder the sale of a property, so.
Or would it make sense to, like you're forgiving the 1/15 every year, to take the balance down to that?
Yeah, yeah, like I said, we'd come up with a way to accommodate the borrower, I'm sure.
Okay. But if the buyer doesn't maintain the property or keep the insurance, what's our recourse?
Well, maybe we should have a mortgage recorded. So if you
That's
feel
what I'm
strongly we should, okay. Well then, yeah, we're looking for a recommendation to EDA. So if you want to recommend it with no administrative changes, that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Other question?
That's what I would recommend, but.
Okay, I see Corey's nodding his head, James nodding his head, Ed's, Brad. Yeah, so if you want to recommend a reauthorization of the program for 2021, I just ask for a voice motion, and we can say with the same administrative procedures as implemented in 2020. Would anyone be willing to make that motion?
I'd make that motion.
So I'm going to say a motion by Southworth to reauthorize the Central Business District Accessibility Enhancement Grant Program for 2021 with the same administrative rules and procedures. Is that acceptable, Bob? Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Abels. I got to scroll. I'm supposed to be taking notes. Good thing it's recorded. Okay, is there discussion? I'm going to go through the roll here and start with Corey.
For discussion or vote?
For discussion.
No discussion.
Okay, Mr. DeVos.
No discussion. I think it's a good program. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dunn.
Well, Russ, I'd just be curious, other than the recording of the mortgage, have you received any other sort of input as to any other reasons people aren't taking advantage of the program?
Well, I don't think the mortgage necessarily was a reason someone would decline. I'd never had that conversation. I was just trying to kind of figure out how we could save $92 to record it and satisfy it. And yeah, so, but we have a motion and a second to recommend the same administrative. So yeah, other questions, James?
And I agree. I think it's a good program. If there's ways to make it, maybe incentivize it for more people to take advantage of it, I'd be okay to consider it. But I think that we have to protect ourselves too. So I agree with keeping things the same with the mortgage recording.
Yeah, I know one thing that perhaps is discouraged is some of the places that have indoor dining. You know, they didn't want the automatic door to sit there and open in the winter for the 15 seconds. And yeah, so if they had a vestibule, they thought perhaps it would work better. But I know personally, I've sat in a coffee shop in the winter, and when that door opens, even just for the moment someone to walk in, you get a little bit of a breeze. And so I can understand that. So
yeah.
Ms. Fredrickson?
It sounds like a wonderful program. I agree. No discussion.
Okay, thank you. Bob Southworth?
I don't have any discussion.
Okay, Ed Johnson?
I have nothing.
Okay, I'm now going to do a roll call vote, and I'm going to start with Mr. DeVos,
Aye.
Mr. Dunn,
Aye.
Ms. Frederickson,
Aye.
Mr. Southworth,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Abels.
Aye.
Very good. The motion carries, and that'll be on the council's agenda. They talked about it last Monday at a workshop, and they all seemed pretty convinced that it worked really well. And I think it's very highly likely that they will reauthorize it on your recommendation. So thank you very much. The next item is our COVID-19 microloans. You closed the access to that program effective the end of business on August 31st. We have had a couple subsequent requests, but we're holding firm at this point. A total of 55 loans were financed for a total dollar value of $487,702. So people reported back to me they liked the ease of the program. They were very happy with the speed at which we could turn things around. A number of them have said that this has made a difference, and they're very, very grateful that the city was looking to perhaps assist them as they dealt with some very unprecedented situations. So subsequent to our loan, both the city and Nicollet County have received a share of the CARES Act. That's the federal funding. The county has decided to put $1 million of that funding into play to assist businesses. So you need less than 20 full-time equivalents. Or you had to have been impacted by the governor's executive order or demonstrate that you had 2 consecutive months with revenues. I think it was 25% less than the previous. From what the businesses are telling me, it's a very detailed and involved application process. So I'm purposely not giving advice or answering questions. I'm referring them to Baker Tilly, which is the third-party provider that the administrator of the county has brought in, or the county line, or I've encouraged them to review the webinars that the county had. I don't want to give someone bad advice and have them not apply. Or so I have suggested that perhaps they're going to have to involve their accountant or bookkeeper. They may have to spend a couple $100s to be able to get a $10,000 grant, but I know there's frustration out there. But hopefully we can get that worked out. And I know people have submitted applications. So the city then received $901,000 of CARES funding, and the city council has had some preliminary discussions on how those funds would be spent. There are parameters and guidelines and rules and regulations, and we want to make sure that we stay within those so that we don't have an audit and have a clawback and need to repay some money. The city's actually identified perhaps very little actual expenses that they have incurred for sanitation, face masks, plexiglass, additional janitorial or what have you. So the council has had a conversation, and they will look for a recommendation from you at some point of following the county and then making our grants or loans that we made into a grant, and with 100% forgivability. We would have to report that as forgiven debt. So there may be a tax obligation, but they would not have to repay the money. We cannot do that until after the county has administered and implemented theirs, or the businesses would not be eligible for the county share. But if they get the county first, then the city, as we understand it, can take action. So the council has had preliminary discussions in that. If they were to add the $487,000 to what the city's had for expenses, at the last accounting I saw left about $300,000, and Brad, the council's talking about doing perhaps a second project with that on rents.
It was just something that was thrown out looking, but it was rents and utility bills were thrown out. There isn't anything. Ed can chime in. I don't think there's really anything pending right now along those lines. So,
well, Sally, could you add anything to that?
Well, we are going to do the MVAC with using MVAC. We're going to do $50,000 that they are going to administer for the lower income people. So we will be doing stuff for utility bills and Our program will be for 100% of the utility bill. Usually the MVAC heat share type programs only cover the electric portion. Our 50,000 will also cover their water, wastewater, stormwater, refuse, and environmental services. So they just have to show and fill out a form that they were impacted by COVID, sign that, and then if they meet income qualifications, they will qualify, and we'll go from there.
Very good, thank you. You won't be asked as an EDA to affirm or approve that part of the program, but you may be asked to make a recommendation as to the forgivability of our COVID-19 microloans. So keep that in mind as we go forward. Are there any questions from the EDA? If there are, just turn on your microphone. I don't hear any. So shoot, I forgot to get Ed the new code. So I can report that the finance department has determined that Ed's accounting was $550 short. So he had spent $550. He said he had an entry error on his end. So thanks to the finance department for catching that. So from Ed's report, add $550. Does anyone have questions, comments? I'll ask Ed to join us at the next meeting. You have the revolving loan fund report, I believe, at the last page of your agenda packet. I didn't have anything really monumental to point out in there. Are there any questions regarding the loan fund? Hearing none. I should have noted on the COVID-19 that we did have for the team close. They've started their $100 a month payments, and then the rapid oil change across from El Agave has now closed. If it's opened under the previous ownership. So Ali Bar's operation didn't pan out there. We'll have the conversation on US Prime. Wait to hear back from Mr. Faber. He was going to suggest when that comes back to you. I do anticipate at the next meeting you'll have a loan application from John Mayer as he tries to convert the former McKinsey agency into some lodging facilities. There's a public notice in the newspaper today about a public hearing with the Planning Commission regarding a privately financed field house that is looking to be built for the old timers on a vacant lot behind the old UBC, or it's on 3rd Street, the vacant lot just south of Hy-Vee. It's about a half block area. It's privately financed. They need a conditional use permit to do what's called indoor sports and recreation. And then they have requested a amendment to the text of the zoning ordinance as it would apply in the Gateway Overlay District. So at this point, the Gateway Overlay District would require an enhanced finish on all of the exterior facades within the Gateway Overlay District. The applicant in this case is suggesting that perhaps would make his project cost prohibitive because we don't allow metal profiles. It requires glass, brick, block, steel, stone. We do allow the synthetic stucco or the EFS, but the pure metal profile, i.e. Dollar General, and that's truly the reason that they adopted a gateway is when Dollar General came in with a metal building with the butt end of the store facing Highway 169 with the loading dock and the dumpsters. And a former member of this organization that was on the council said it'll start feeling like you're driving down an alley as you come into town. And I've got some really good examples of a bad gateway. And think of Highway 14 as you're coming into old Highway 14 as you're coming into Owatonna, and you got the strip malls with all the butt ends and the bare doors and the bare glass bulbs. So the council did adopt that. The applicant is asking that it be amended to only require the enhanced finish on a facade presented to a public street or a public park. And so City Administrator Prafke and I are supporting that. The Planning Commission will consider the matter on the 1st. And then the City Council will consider that. I think it's the 26th of October. The conditional use permit will be considered by the Planning Commission on the 1st, and then that goes to a group called the Board of Zoning Appeals and Adjustments, and they will either unconditionally approve the project or approve it with conditions, and one may be something that the parking lot lights dim to X lumens after 10 o'clock p.m. We'll run that through that process. Hy-Vee is still looking to do a convenience store on the old Lake Washington Marine on the north end of town. That's going a little bit slower than we anticipated. Quick Trip then is still going forward with their plans for 2021 construction on the former Anytime Fitness Seitzer Ford. Was it Seitzer Ford? Yes, Seitzer Ford on that site. And they're getting some title things cleaned up with the city attorney's office. We met with Alumacraft finally. We had been working with the previous administration at Alumacraft because our MS4 stormwater permit would require that if they disturb X square feet of ground or add X square feet of building, they may have to do, or they would have to do, some on-site storage of stormwater drainage. The MS4 permit is put upon us by the state. So we don't have an option on the standards. We have to follow them. If we don't follow the standards, it's not the builder that is fined. It's actually the city of St. Peter for not enforcing our permit. So they're making some decisions about that. We've offered that we would go to the Greater Minnesota. It's a public infrastructure financing program for the Department of Employment and Economic Development. That would provide 50% of the capital cost of the pond construction. But it does need to be owned by the city. So we're working with Alumacraft trying to assess, is there a place on their current property that they could do it? We're looking off-site in the immediate neighborhood. Are there residential properties that perhaps could be acquired to address some stormwater issues? But we're very glad that they finally got a new person in charge of the plant. And it also appears that none of our previous discussions had been run up the pole to the corporate. So we're kind of starting over. They brought up 17 semi-loads of equipment from Arkadelphia when they closed that plant, and they are consolidating those operations into St. Peter. I don't know how they fit another potato in that 5-pound pack, but they found more room in the buildings, and they're maximizing the use of the other building they've got on Galt Street, where Hendricks and Spices used to be, and Phoenix Biocomposites used to be. But in my conversation with them, I'd have been remiss if I didn't mention a greenfield site in the North Industrial Park where they could set up a building to optimize their product flow. And I said I'd try to find a syndicate to own the building and lease it to them if they preferred that option, like we did with Creation Technology. I did not promise to buy their existing facility. So, they were grateful for the conversations. They're doing some internal analysis. Public Works Director Moulton and my office are doing some analysis on our end, but we are steadfast in our resolve that we will apply for this the state grant dollars that pay 50% of the capital costs, because the pond would be, it must handle only industrial drainage. It can't intermingle with any retail or residential. So since it would only collect rainwater from the Alumacraft site, it would be their assessment and their cost of the project. So if we can help them out and get 50% in grant, I think they'd be very grateful. One other issue is Mr. Prafke and I had met with an organization called Rebound.
Russ, I have a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
Would they have to do that in any town they built in?
No, the towns that have the MS4 put on them are the towns over 10,000 in population that are in the watershed of an impaired body of water. So this didn't apply to us until we went over 10,000 in population. And we're in the Minnesota River watershed, which is the impaired body of water. So it doesn't apply statewide, but there were, as I understand the matter, a number of communities, including St. Peter, that joined together and filed suit saying it was arbitrary and capricious. These rules, you step a foot outside of St. Peter and they don't apply. They only apply within the city limits. So we lost that litigation. And so, yeah, it's costing cities hundreds of thousands of dollars to retrofit to meet those new standards. But they're from MPCA. So, yeah, it doesn't apply to every city, Bob.
Gotcha. So it's just ones that are close to the river.
Well, yeah, New Prague, I don't know what their body of water is. Moorhead, in the Red River Valley, and you can imagine Moorhead's probably going to spend 5 times what we are, 10 times what we are perhaps. So I don't have the exact number, but it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we have incurred to meet those new standards as we put in new infrastructure. But again, it's not an option to ignore it, because the city of New Prague, as I understand it, got a $25,000 fine because the builder didn't have the erosion control around the site. Now, we cannot pass that fine on to the builder, and so it was assumed by the city. So that's another reason why the public works inspectors are diligent in enforcing those rules. So,
Thanks.
any other questions? Very good. Rebound Enterprises, an operation out of Northfield. They've put together community real estate funds, and they have 2 in Northfield. They have 1 in Grand Rapids, and they have 1 in Faribault. And my thought was, if it works in those cities, why couldn't it work here? I'll get some information to you. I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Tanis at the Private Development Corp, because what they do is they look for a general partner that's going to do 20% of the project. And then they look for limited partners that would each come in at a minimum of $25,000. Now, all the investors have to be accredited. So it was either, I think, a net worth over $1 million or an annual income of excess of $200,000. And they've invested in community real estate projects in all of those communities. There is a 5-person investment board that's put together that includes 2 members from the general partner and then 3 members of the limited partnership. So there is input. They look at, I think it was an 8 to 12% return. So I will, I had them here Friday, and actually they want to look at, perhaps could they put a group together to look at parking lot number 5. So I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Tanis, see perhaps if the development corp would have any interest in serving as a general partner, and we'll go from there. But I can't believe if it works in those other 4 communities, why we couldn't do it better, actually. Questions? You can Google them, check them out. They have a pretty good website that explains the process. And I tell you what, I'll promise to send you out the PowerPoint that they shared with me. Any questions on Rebound? Again, check out their website. The last thing I have on a report from me is the Small Business Development Center at Mankato. The South Central one in Mankato has been named the Minnesota 2020 Small Business Development Center of Excellence. So that's quite an accomplishment from them. They're very highly regarded. It's absolutely 100% free business assistance. I regularly refer people to that group, and yeah, they're very highly regarded by their clients. For a number of years, they came as the #1 rated on a client satisfaction survey. So hats off to the Small Business Development Center and Dave Hahn, their leader, who actually is a St. Peter resident. So any questions on any topic? I see we got 1:45 here. Would anyone be inclined to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
DeVos will move.
So moved.
You got a motion by DeVos. Was that a second by Abels?
Yes.
All right, motion by Abels and DeVos. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed want to hang out? Hearing none. Well, thank you all very much. Julie, welcome to the EDA.
Thank you.
I don't know if you know all the gentlemen that are your members with you, but hopefully you'll get face to face at some point here in the future. So
Sounds good.
thank you all very much and have a wonderful afternoon.
All right.
Russ, did you tell Julie that she was supposed to bring donuts this time?
She probably
I
brought a donut.
promise I will when we go back in person.
And
We'll
you
need
got a school song too.
that. What's that?
You got to sing your school fight song also.
Oh, I might have to go back and it's been a few years.
None of them want to hear my high school fight song, I'll tell you that.
Oh, right.
I'm not shy, so you'll find that out.
All right. Have a wonderful day,
See you
everybody.
later.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.